pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
How you doing this morning, Jared?
I'm fantastic, Ollie. Any morning I get to wake up and have coffee and spend some time with my man, I feel pretty blessed.
Amen, man. Even when it's cold outside, huh?
I purposely said I wasn't going to mention the cold on the way here because I'm sure people are tired of hearing me bitch about the cold. But I will say, when I came in, it was no degrees. Which is one
zero?
of my truck says 0.
Oh, wow.
Which is one of the things, like, why do we have degrees less than 0? Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, if you get to 0, like, you have no degrees, like, why do we have negative degrees? Like, it's just 0. There's just no degrees.
That's a good question. You can't get, like, a negative grade.
I just never quite understood it's negative 18. Like, well, fuck, man, why do I need to know it's negative? Like, how is it negative? How is it colder than 0?
Yeah.
I just don't understand. I don't know how you're colder than nothing. I've always been fascinated by that. So any of our community that's adept at the weather and all that stuff, explain to us how we can be colder than nothing.
Yeah, let us know. I'm curious.
I think when you get to 0, like, it should just be 0. And then you can only come on. Yeah, man, you're frozen.
Oh, funny, man. Mother Nature, unpredictable.
Can't measure it. Dude, yeah. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. I'm feeling good. Had a really productive Monday. I started my new accountability group because we are more likely to let ourselves down before we let others down. So having accountability partners and having my goals for the week out in the open on a shared spreadsheet again with 3 other people who are going to be looking at it every week really has given me a nice little boost in productivity. So yeah. I'm excited to continue crushing this 2020 in a strong way.
That's awesome. Off to a good start. We're halfway through February already.
Yeah, it's moving fast.
Goes quick, man.
It's moving fast. And, man, I'm coming off of really good vibes from our first guest interview, man. That was awesome, recording with Rustin Hughes of Be Bold.
Yeah, that was pretty powerful stuff, and it was kind of fun to have some different energy, have people share their stories, and really, I think, some powerful messages in there, some good takeaways.
Yeah.
What would you say was something that stood out to you in Rustin's message?
Really just the philosophy of not giving up, man. I mean, he had so much adversity thrown at him, from losing his wife to amputating his leg to being on these painkillers. I'm not sure if he said it in this episode, but he had told me before that, he was on prescription painkillers.
They talked about it.
Millions of people are so addicted and
it's
so
epidemic.
Hard to get. It's an epidemic.
Absolutely.
And I remember the story he told me of, he knew that they were really messing with his head, with his life. And when he went to the doctors and it's like, I'm not taking this shit anymore. And they're like, you can't just get off your prescription drugs. And he's like, I just did.
Yeah.
When he told me that story, I was like, damn, that's powerful, because he talks about hitting rock bottom and climbing out of the depths of that. So really never giving up, and that anything is possible were my 2 big takeaways. What about you?
I thought a couple of things. First, when he talked about that he was actually more disabled with 2 legs than he has since his amputation because of his thinking.
Crazy?
But it's true. I mean, how many people go through life without a physical disability, but mentally they're disabling themselves? Not following through on things, not pursuing their dreams, not doing the things that they know they're supposed to do to make them happy. I found that to be interesting because so many people do it.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves. So, but like putting our own self-limits on us could be a disability, right? You never become who you could have been.
Oh, 100%. Dude, that's such a badass quote. I want that on a T-shirt. I was more disabled when I had my other leg, and just a picture of Russ.
Yeah.
With his Iron Man prosthetic.
Well, hopefully, some of the community members listen to that story and want to connect with Rustin and the good work he's doing through Be Bold and his adaptive athletes and stuff, and really help him help others achieve their dreams. And that's probably the thing that stuck with me most was even just talking with Rustin, trying to get him to share more of his story. Because he consistently went back to his wife and her battle with cancer and what an inspiration she was, and that she was actually the term "be bold" was something I think he said her grandfather gave to her as a little girl, and even his selflessness is just amazing, right? Because even when it's an opportunity to really talk about what he's been through, what he's working on, he really deflected all of it back to other people that made him better. You know, his wife, Ryan.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he is who he is and why he's going to be so successful is everything that Rustin does is about helping other people. You know, like right now, you know, with Be Bold and all the little kids he has coming in and all the adults that are coming together. And he's really pushing the limits and the mindset that when you're disabled, you can't do certain things. And he's showing that you can, and not only is he doing it, but he's bringing other people with him. I think it's just a huge testament to his character, his heart, and why he was perfect to come on the show and share that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it. What a way to kick off our guest episode for our On Purpose community listeners. We are starting our guest series for the On Purpose podcast, and Rustin Hughes was guest number 1. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go back and check that out. Very powerful.
And if you guys out in our community, if you know people or you are people that have a very well-defined purpose and a story that you're wanting to share, email us and we'll screen it and bring guests on. But yeah, it's pretty humbling to be able to just have people share their stories with you and to share them with our community.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's super cool. So what we got today, Jared, episode number 49.
Oh, man. So, yeah, we're coming up on a year, and I wanted to talk about something that's really it's a word that's going around a lot right now with the passing of Kobe Bryant and some of the other things in our world, and that's the term legacy. And so I wanted to kind of dive into that, and I thought of it after talking with Rustin and some of the talks I've had with my kids is, what does legacy really mean for us? Mm-hmm. And what are we doing to either create legacy or live up to a legacy?
Yeah. Well, for me, the first thing I think of is what people are going to say at my funeral. That's kind of what I think of with legacy. And then from that starting point, anything that's said after that, after my funeral, after I'm dead. So like you as a great example, talking about your book, like now you've created a piece of legacy that's going to survive you. Right. It's going to go past you. And what people take from this book is going to be a big part of your legacy. So I really think I like a quote that's people remember how you made them feel, not exactly what you said.
For sure.
You know, all these conversations we're mainly going to remember the emotion. So for me, legacy is how people feel about their experience interacting with you, typically after you're gone.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons I wrote the book when I did, and the stories I shared in there is because I think you're right. A lot of people share how they feel about one another, their thankfulness, thanking you for the role you played in my life when you've passed. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the premises for writing that book, because I wanted to thank these people while we're all still alive, while their family can see what they've done. So I think sometimes we think of legacy as ourselves, but a lot of times legacy you can help build for other people too. Mm-hmm. Right? And like Rustin, listening to his story, part of his legacy is what he's doing for everybody else. And you talk to financial advisors and money coaches, and they're talking about like wealth building and legacy building through finances, which are important for sure. But I don't think your things are your legacy. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people focus on that, and they're talking about like their inheritance. I want to be able to pass down, some generational wealth or this or that, or my grandpa, had this kind of car back in the day, and that's part of their legacy. But I think the physical things are actually the least important part of your legacy.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely the ideology, the mindset, how people react to you because of a legacy that was left in your name. People
See,
will
that's
say,
interesting because here's what I truly believe: your legacy is your name. And I've had a couple recent e- experiences that really reinforced this for me. One was we were at a wrestling match, and Trey wrestled and did well, and we're talking to some people we know afterwards, and the one guy, Kerry, tells me, "Oh man, people were talking about what a beast Trey is," and I was like, "Yeah, have you ever seen his dad? There's no surprise." And I really started, like, that hit me
mm-hmm.
because a lot of my family isn't super physically fit. There's not many, quite honestly, many other family members that you would have said that comment about.
Right.
So your legacy is always changing. It's always evolving. It's not going to be this one big, for most people, it won't be one big incident that defines your legacy. There's rare exceptions, like the captain that landed his plane on the Hudson River. I can't remember his name, but now he had one huge incident that really is his legacy. Or Captain Phillips from the pirate ship that the Somalis took. Like, that's now his legacy. But for most of us, our legacy is defined in our day-to-day things. Like, just that guy saying, well, yeah, you should see his dad, he's a beast. Well, how did that become his opinion of me? Through my workouts, through my MMA, like all the little things I did allowed him to think that, which in turn then allowed him to think, well, that's what his son's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think too many times we think a legacy is these big things. Your legacy is what you do every little day, the little things you do every single day.
Yeah. And I think we have a living legacy too. I know for me, the first thing I think about is what are people going to say at my funeral? What is the general of after I die? But I do believe that we have a living legacy.
And now I 100% agree. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I think I was trying to go is, if you ask people about legacy, they'll say the same thing. Like, what do people say when I'm dead? Mm-hmm. Well, I want to know, what are they going to say when you're alive?
Yeah.
What would they say when you're alive? What are you doing? And I've had, like I said, that wrestling deal, and then, some different opportunities for Trey that have come up because of my relationship with those people, because of their opinion of what I've done. They allow him, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's one of the things we miss sometimes is, if I'm doing little things right, my legacy can open doors for people to carry my same name.
Yeah.
Right? Like you hear Hardy, oh, you're with Jared Hardy. Okay, yeah, come on in. Let's see what we can do. Let's work. But what about the opposite? What about if I'm doing the things I'm not supposed to do? I'm not showing up. I'm not being on time. I'm not fulfilling my obligations. And now all of a sudden I'm going to pass that to my kids to where they show up and they're like, oh, you're a Hardy. Yeah, and we're not really.
It's not a good feeling.
But it happens.
It does. And I can tell you from experience, it's not a good feeling, man. I was a little shithead, bully, bad kid, class clown in middle school and my first couple years of high school. And my brother Amir came up through Eisenhower Middle School, and they saw the last name of Boozlom, and all the teachers were like, oh, shit, are you kidding me? We got to deal with another one. Because I was bad. I was always in in-school suspension, and just I was an athlete, so I would get in trouble with the coaches. We had it's called alternative workout, and I was always an alternative workout, man. I mean, I was a little shit. And I remember my brother being just kind of like, man, this sucks. Everybody thinks I'm shitty because of you.
Yeah.
And me kind of being like, damn, like I made that much of a negative impact on some of my middle school teachers to where I realized those are the years that I realized what type of impact a legacy could have. Thankfully, I did a little better in high school. So then once he followed my footsteps in high school, people were like, oh, Boozy, which is what they used to call me. Like, oh, little young Boozy over here, he's going to be a good wrestler, or, whatever. But he did really have to go through a lot of that. So I was very fortunate. Those of you who are older siblings, I think that's a that's a great place to where you can already look at and be aware of the legacy that you're already leaving, especially if you have younger siblings, not just through school, but through, even through your parents, through your family members, how they talk about you. Be aware of that and the legacy you're leaving.
Yeah, and I don't know that we frame a lot of our decisions to ask ourselves, this decision, how does it affect those who came before me with my name, and how will it open or close doors for those coming after me? Mm-hmm. And that's what I was talking to Trey and Taya about. I was really like, hey, as you guys are getting ready to go off in your lives, wherever you're at, you're going to have tough decisions. And one of the frameworks that I think will help you is when you're at that decision point, ask yourself, does this pay honor and respect to those who came before me? Does it open doors for those after me? Or if I make this decision, would the people before me be disapproving? And does it shut down doors for those that are coming behind me? And if you balance your decisions off that, it's pretty easy to know which way you should go.
Yeah.
But you think about our legacy is literally built on our little actions daily, our little decisions daily. Choosing to live up to what we said we were going to do, showing up when we're supposed to show up, following through when we're supposed to follow through. If you don't do it, like you said, you were listening to a workshop last night, he said you're lying.
Yeah.
That's your legacy.
Yeah.
And think about how many times do I allow you, if you're not going to follow through, you're not going to do what you say, how many times do I engage with you? I'm done after a certain point.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden a mirror's going to come. What lens is a mirror already viewed under? Right. Well, I was with his brother and he wasn't doing anything he was supposed to do, so I'm not sure I even want to try this.
Yep.
And so that door doesn't even get open for Amir through no fault of his own, but because you built a legacy through your behaviors.
Mm. Yeah.
And I don't think we stress that enough to our young people. Like you. Yeah, I mean, we tell people like, hey, be good in school because your sister's coming up behind you or whatever. But I don't know that we have the capacity at that point, or it's reinforced enough that, hey, you're literally representing your grandpa right now. Mm-hmm. You're representing like every decision you make reflects on what they've done as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tarnish a legacy that somebody worked so hard for.
Yeah. And so do you think, is there any examples you have or times in your life where you directly benefited from the legacy you were given?
Maybe in small ways, visiting family in Lebanon and in the Middle East of the legacy that my grandfather had, of people who are like, oh, my grandfather's also Ali Abu Salam, or in Lebanon they say Ali. Really like, hey.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, like you're Ali's grandson, like we're gonna take care of you kind of here, or stuff with my dad, like being in Houston and around his friends and stuff, but not really in my experience here growing up in the United States. Like a great example is when I was rushing a fraternity in college. Again, Texas Tech, I'm this half Arab, half Mexican dude in a West Texas, very, very predominantly white Greek life, fraternities and sororities. And it was I already kind of had the odds stacked against me, just not being white and having a last name like Abu Salam, to get in. And I remember some of the better fraternities, people would be like, oh, well, we're legacy. Like I had my older brother was in this fraternity. My father was in this fraternity. And a lot of things with my dad being a first generation, being an immigrant, he was born in Lebanon, coming here. There was a lot of things in the States that I didn't have legacy in. I didn't have older people in sports.
Yeah.
I didn't have people before me in the fraternities. So I really, to be honest with you, I haven't had a very, let's say, how do I word this? I didn't have a lot given to me because of legacy left before.
Yeah, but I don't think things have to be given to you for you to benefit from your legacy. Perfect example, I think, is the gym. Mm-hmm. You've never fought before. Nobody's ever seen you in a cage. Yet we're distinctly having a tough time getting you an opponent. Why is that?
I think I'm coming from Trials MMA and
legacy.
I have a blue belt in jiu-jitsu.
Legacy. Because other people research the fighters that have come before you, mm-hmm. and that they show up on weight, they show up prepared. we're not always going to win, but we're going to fight. So they're not taking an opportunity to fight you simply because of where you were coming from. Mm-hmm. That's a legacy, right? Think about it. If we were a gym that half prepared people, just threw them out there, didn't really care, they got beat up, they weren't in shape, you would have had plenty of fight offers.
Damn it, Trials.
But
why is the legacy so good?
But that's part of it, right? It's because we do little things. We create names. Your family legacy, work legacy, right? You create a legacy through your business on how you work, how you handle things. Like being a police officer, there are some agencies around the nation that are known for poor hiring standards, a lack of training, and corruption. You could be the utmost great person, but if you're associated with them, there are certain people that are going to view you through the lens of this is how it's been. Whereas like Fort Collins, we're blessed. We're always in the upper echelon of law enforcement training, pay. Like people respect this community. So you get hired here, even though you haven't earned it because you're brand new, you're viewed as being a good person, an honest person, integrity because of the people that came before you.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like legacy is not just individualized. Legacy is your businesses, it's your culture, it's your family, it's who you associate yourselves with.
Yeah, everything can have legacy. Brands even.
For sure. What like On Purpose podcast.
Yeah.
We're creating a legacy every episode. We show up, we put them out, we're constantly seeking improvement. Mm-hmm. We're bringing on guests to share their stories. Right? People, they tune in because there's certain expectations of what they're going to receive from us.
Right.
That's our legacy.
How about you? Have you benefited from legacy?
For sure. You know what I mean?
Where specifically would you say?
Many places. Work, you know, like the whole Fort Collins police example. Mm. Like this community didn't know me when I moved here. I'd never lived in Colorado, never been in Fort Collins. But yet I was treated a certain way because I was associated with Fort Collins police and all the people that had come before me. And all the people that had treated them professionally before created a legacy where they would expect the same from me. Being around Ryan Schultz, same kind of thing, right? Like I show up to coaching and I show up to shows and we have a certain legacy there. Like people know, like they remember what Ryan did on national television. So the people associated with him, they assume you're at that same caliber. So I feel like I benefit from legacy consistently because I put myself in circles, like we've talked about before, your circle of people that are also, even if you're not consciously creating legacy, you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is creating your legacy. So I think we all benefit from that, and I think it's the little things that create legacy for you. And I think I would really love for people to shift their mindset as to legacy is what people say when I'm dead to, no, legacy is what people say about me every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they say there's two versions of you. How you think you represent yourself and then what other people think about you.
Right. Yeah. And how do you mesh the two?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
You know what I mean? I think to me, the two get meshed in your actions. Right? Because you can tell yourself, oh, I'm this, I'm that, but you know you're not doing the work. You know you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Well, there's no way that external people are going to say you're this, that, and that because you're not following up. When you show up and do what you're supposed to do, now not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to think they couldn't do it better or you should have done this differently, whatever. But the majority of the time, if you show up and you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to have very similar opinions from the external and the internal. And I think that's when people are the most successful. That's when you're the most happy. I think when those are out of balance, that's where depression comes in. You know what I mean? That's where people really struggle is because they have this idea of who they should be, but this group out, the external people don't see that. And a lot of times it's in our actions. Or we're in the wrong circle. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to be a high achiever and you're around a bunch of people that don't want to achieve, they're probably never going to see your achievements because they're not doing it themselves.
Yeah, your legacy is definitely linked to the people and the organizations that you associate with, for sure.
Yeah, which is why you got to be selective in who's in your circle and what are they contributing to your legacy, because you don't build it by yourself, right? Like if, you you and I are running a podcast together, but you're not living up to your end of the deal, well, that tarnishes mine, right? Because I chose to let you in here. Now, all of a sudden, I'm viewed differently. But on the flip side, you can elevate mine as well, right? And now, all of a sudden, I'm getting new opportunities because I'm associated with you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But it goes back to doing the things you're supposed to do, and then who is in that circle with you? Who's helping you build your legacy?
Yeah. Yeah, I like this topic because I know you've talked about it quite a bit before, and associating with the book and even the talks of this podcast. So for you, Jared, what are you consistently doing to create your legacy?
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't even say create, but to further your legacy.
I think, for me, doing what I'm supposed to do, like showing up, making sure I'm giving where I'm supposed to give, making sure I'm pushing the envelope on what I can achieve and what I know I'm capable of, so that it helps others find their path and it helps others find their way. Having honest conversations with people that are important to me, and sharing, struggles and successes, and allowing myself. I think that's probably the best thing I've done recently to really solidify who I am and how I see myself, is allow myself to have all my emotions and allow myself to struggle, and sometimes sharing those publicly and sharing them for sure with my kids. And even though that's not necessarily a success, it's building legacy, and in turn it is actually a success, because people that view you as only a success actually see that, oh no, he's struggling, he had to overcome this, which now helps them overcome theirs, or at least see that it's possible, which I think goes back to what Rustin was saying. Like, Rustin showed you, hey, there's a lot of stuff possible when you don't disable yourself mentally.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think when you think about creating your legacy? Are there specific things that you do that you're like, okay, this is going to benefit people that come behind me? Is really going to make those that came before me proud?
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is what I'm putting out there in the world. The podcast is going to be a big part of my legacy. Every social media post, story, gratitude interview, everything that I put out there for people to see. And then, like you said, the daily actions, how people feel when they interact with me. Like, I have my Lucky's legacy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that made me feel good when all the Lucky's cashiers had messaged the On Purpose thing of, like, people there. I've left the legacy just by the small interactions that I've had, and the legacy of my career, what people say about me in the cannabis industry, how I carry myself at trade shows and networking events. So I think every moment that you are either interacting with another human being in person or putting out something that other people are going to see is an opportunity to build legacy.
Yeah, that's good. And I think true legacy is not what you've actually said about yourself, or maybe even the people you interacted with, but to really measure your legacy and how am I showing up in the world, what are the people you're interacting with telling everybody else?
Right.
That's your legacy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, Lucky's is fantastic because that young lady went home and told her husband about the interaction and talks to the other clerks. So now, even though there may be a clerk you've never talked to before, when you come in, because of your legacy, because of how you've interacted, because of how you show up every time, they already know who you are, even though you've never met them.
It happened.
You know what I mean?
The clerk I had never met, she's like, "You're the guy with the podcast, right?" I was like, yeah, nice to meet you. So, yeah, it happens. And I've also been on the other end, kind of like with the Amir example.
Yeah.
Of quickly seeing like, oh, my actions, now people think I'm this troublemaker type of person, or, the Bondi thing.
Yeah. To
where sometimes there can be negative things that may be a stain on your legacy, but it's also
temporary,
exactly. And constantly building it.
And I think that's where sometimes people will get derailed and focus too much is that building a good legacy, a legacy that lives on beyond your time and that impacts others, doesn't mean you're perfect. But it does require, how do you bounce back from mistakes? How do you bounce back from your imperfections? You don't sit and dwell on them. Like, hey, that one moment's not going to define my whole life. Like, not everybody in the world is going to view me through this lens. If I get up and move forward. It's the same for me as like losing my last fight. I lost my fight in front of thousands of people. I sold the most tickets on the show. It was awful. But if you go around now, people aren't like, oh, yeah, that Jared Hart, yeah, he lost his last fight. Like, they don't even remember that I lost my last fight. They remember being part of the culture and the community and the charity and wearing the shirts and the big fat heads in the crowd. Like, they remember the fun stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think that's possible because I got up and I continued on. I went different directions, did more things that created good. Mm-hmm. If I'd have stopped and been like, okay, I lost my last fight, I'm nothing, stayed in that moment, well, then that would have changed my legacy. So you don't have to be perfect. And I think that's important for our community members to remember, is a huge part of your legacy and who you are is how do you handle defeat? How do you handle shortcomings, mistakes, things you're not proud of? Because we're all going to have them, but being able to accept it, move past it, that's where you really grow. And that is part of your legacy. Mm-hmm. And there's no perfect people out there. And, Kobe Bryant, for example, was not perfect. If you're in Colorado, you remember the stuff up in the mountains and him being accused of some stuff. But when he died, like, literally what's everybody focused on? His parenting, his relationship with his daughter, what he gave, the people he inspired. People will forgive you if you forgive yourself and move forward. Yeah,
I agree with that. So for some of our listeners, Jared, that might be wondering, what's the importance of legacy?
Yeah.
Why should I even care about what my legacy is?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I think you need to care because there's people that came before you that created it. And I guarantee at some point in your life, you've either benefited or been hurt by that legacy. Whether it's not having opportunities because of your last name, not having opportunities because of the way people that you're associated with performed or showed up. Or on the flip side, getting opportunities that maybe you weren't necessarily deserving of, but because you were around people that met expectations, did what they were supposed to, people were willing to take a risk on you. So I think it's important, especially if you're parenting, to pay attention to your legacy because it may or may not open doors for your children. It may or may not allow them to have access to things and experiences that they may not have had beforehand. So your legacy is never actually about you. It's about those that came before you and those that are coming after you. And I think for me, excuse me, it really hit home when that comment about Trey, that because I've done certain things, people automatically associated him with those things. And thankfully, they were positive. And it really got me thinking, like, what if I hadn't done any of this? What if I'd have let myself go? What if I'd have gotten really overweight? What if I would have, done a lot of things that are easier? And then Trey would have lost. Would they said, yeah, well, look at his dad. Of course he's going to lose. You know what I mean? And it really hit home that, like, man, my kids are actually being judged. Well, not judged. My kids are being viewed through what I'm doing. And because I've done certain things, like, they just assume that my kids will automatically do those or at least show up in that same frame. And when I think about that, like, to me, that's important because those same people may now see, like, Trey or Taya or Joanna's kids in 10 years and be like, oh, you should have seen his grandpa. I mean, that's pretty humbling to know that what I'm doing today, other people will be associated with down the road.
Yeah. Crazy to think about.
It is. But, I mean, like, I had never thought about it until it came up. And I was like, wow, the whole drive home from wrestling, I'm thinking about, like, man, like, they just assumed Trey would be okay. But what if I hadn't done these things? And And it's the small things, it's the daily things. It's not the huge things that build your life. For most people, it's not going to be a huge one incident that defines your life. It's going to be what you do every single day. And you got to keep showing up, man. And you got to watch your circle.
Got to.
What about you?
Got to. What about me?
Yeah, what do you think if you say we passed tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you would have left a positive legacy?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some.
Do you think
people out
anybody's
there.
actually honest at funerals, though, to be honest with you? Do you think anybody ever goes to a funeral and is like, this guy was a flaming asshole, and we're glad he's gone?
I mean, I don't think they'd say it to that extent, but I mean, I think after you're gone, people are honest. Maybe not directly at the funeral, but I think people will say, people gossip. People like to talk about people.
Yeah.
And I think people will at least share the experiences that they had with you. Maybe
Yeah.
not very negative, but maybe more apathetic. They're like, I didn't really
Yeah.
have
Or they
anything
won't show up at
for
the
'em."
funeral.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be a real quiet funeral,
Yeah, that's the worst.
I would think.
You know, if you have 3 people at your funeral.
Yeah, and it's not. Yeah, and I just, I ponder that, and I'm just like, man, okay, if my life ends tonight for some reason, did I do enough to make sure that the people coming behind me have opportunities that we've lived up to what I should have been doing?
Yeah.
And I think when people selfishly look at, okay, how do I build my legacy? They miss the big point that your legacy is not about you.
Mm-hmm.
That your legacy is about those that are before you and after you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's going to mean a lot more when I have children of my own one day. I
Sure.
think that'll be when it resonates a lot more with me. But I think of the people that I read about right now, like I'm reading Gandhi's autobiography and the legacy that he left. It's really cool to see like a lot of the actions and the stories of his life, and to see what types of legacies have really stood the test of time.
Yeah.
What these people have done to be such good role models. You know, your people like Gandhi, like MLK, like
Yeah.
JFK, like these people that have been dead for a while, that we still celebrate their legacy. And I think that's something that we should all strive for. And if it's not a global impact like that, at least leave something for those who are closest to you that they can follow, guidelines,
Yeah.
good way to live life, be a blessing to others.
Yeah, I think the worst thing you can do is live your life in a manner that closes doors to those coming up behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't have control, really. Like we really don't have control over how big our legacy gets in death, right? Like I'm sure Gandhi had no idea. And if you look at a lot of people that we study now and they were like, wow, they were so impactful, they really didn't know their impact in their lifetime. It became clear afterwards when we reflect on what they were doing.
Yeah, that's crazy too.
And if you think about that, like the worst thing we can do to me is live in a selfish bubble where it's always our self-interest and it's always us first, with deceit, trickery, selfishness, and then the people coming behind you don't even get opportunities.
And leading your life that way sucks, man.
I would think.
Like when you're, I can tell you from experience, I like I said, I wasn't the best kid growing up, and when it was always just trying to put others down to bring myself up, and it's the results of that type of lifestyle. Yeah, short-term gratification, you might feel good in little moments, but it really sucks.
Yeah, so I think that's something important for our community to pay attention to, is legacies built in your daily actions.
Yep, every day.
And how are you showing up? How are you showing up, and who are you showing up with? I think those are the two big things for me, that if I constantly evaluate those things, I know I'm putting myself in a position to be successful.
Yeah. I just thought of an exercise. It's not in the practice, but I did an exercise. I forgot where it was recommended to me, but it was really interesting because it was a series of questions that you gave to the people closest to you.
Ooh.
And you're like, hey, like I'm doing this self-awareness exercise. I'd really appreciate if you answer these. And I think some of them are like, what do you believe are some of my greatest strengths?
Yeah.
What do you believe are some of my greatest weaknesses? And there was one more, but that's a really good gauge for what type of legacy you're leaving, is ask some of the people that you're closest to, maybe even some people that you're not as close to, but that you interact a lot with, like a coworker or something. See what other people say about you, because that's truly the legacy that you're leaving. What you think about yourself doesn't really have much to do with your legacy. It's what other people are saying.
For sure. Yeah, that's good. You'd have to be a little prepared for some honesty there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, especially if you, but here's the thing. I don't think anybody, I can't say that, but I would think the majority of people, if they know they're not doing the right things,
Mm-hmm.
they know it whether you tell me or not.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think where it gets tough is people that think they're actually doing the right things, but nobody else sees it that way.
Yeah.
There's some confusion.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to get that feedback. Yeah, so legacy team is what you do every day. It's how you're showing up, who you're showing up with, and what are you doing with your time here. And it's big, man. Like I just, I think back to Rustin's interview, and like his legacy isn't gonna be that he lost his leg, which is probably one of the bigger moments in his life.
Oh yeah.
His legacy is gonna be, what has he done for the community that at one point viewed themselves as unable to do certain activities, but now he's showing it's possible.
Yeah.
And
that's such an amazing story.
Yeah. So, are you good to give him some homework, Mr. Ali? Get some practice?
Yeah, some purposeful practice. I just want to reiterate, this is the most important piece. We all take in information, but the most successful people on the planet are the ones that act. That apply the information that they're learning. So do yourself a favor and don't just listen to our podcast and do nothing. That doesn't do anything for you. When you listen and you apply, you take action, that's when you really grow.
Yeah,
and that's what our podcast is about.
Yeah, and even you last night, you're out listening to a webinar, you brought in your notes today. Like just the act of physically writing something out starts to make things real. It starts to change what we're viewing. Instead of listening for entertainment, listening to occupy our mind while we're busy, when we start practicing, now things get in motion to change.
Yeah, and some of that stuff, like I was sharing with you, we've all heard that before.
Yeah.
Well, we know it, but it's about the action of getting better. An MMA fighter knows how to do a double leg takedown. He knows his favorite combos. But guess what? He's going to do them again and again and again. He's going to act. It's the same thing with business. Just because you might hear, oh, I know what legacy is, I know what legacy means, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the exercise. Exercise, action, that's what gets us better. Even if it's information that you've heard before, it's acting upon it.
Yep, absolutely. So let's give you guys some practice and start building our legacies moment by moment.
Let's do it. So purposeful practice part 1 is, how have you benefited or been hurt by a legacy? Part 2, what are you doing to leave a legacy? And remember, that's on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Number 3, are you opening or closing doors for those that follow you? And then number 4, most importantly, accountability right here. Email your practice to us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you in here, Ali.
Likewise.
And, man, for all you joining us out there, our numbers are going up each week. And
thank you, guys.
Thank you. So that means you're sharing the podcast, which is really the only price we ask is just share it. Let a couple people know. And don't share like once, but like if there's an episode you like, share that episode with a bunch of people and help us really continue to build the On Purpose community and create more purposeful warriors out there. So with that, team, I want to remind you all that life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We thank you for being here, and we'll see you again next week.